Rebecca, I'm so glad you're here and able to take an afternoon or evening rather with me to talk about something that many families right now are dealing with that I think most of us never expected to find ourselves in this particular predicament, right? Like I know I didn't expect to be in this predicament. I really didn't expect to take this leap of faith and really adjust how my family would embrace learning in the near future or farther beyond that. But alas, here we are. We're all posed with this issue of how are we supposed to educate our kids in this crazy pandemic world? And what is the right solution for our family? So I think first and foremost, I want to just like lay the groundwork. I know you'll agree. Whatever decision you make is the right decision, right?
Right,
Like,
absolutely. For this year, there is no right decision that makes everybody right.
I love that, right? And as mamas, don't we just sometimes want to feel right? Like, how many times do you feel like they're with my kids? I'm like, oh, I keep making mistakes. But right now, the right thing is whatever is right for your family. So before we dive into any things for people to consider and chew on, rest assured, you're doing the right thing, mama. Don't give up on that. So interestingly enough, Rebecca, you're the catalyst that helped me kind of form Mommas Helping Mamas, whether you knew it or not. I would say, gosh, 6 months ago, my family, was up against an interesting situation, and I started reaching out to you as trying to figure out what the right things to do for my family were. You were the first mama helping me, this mama. And then as the pandemic hit, I started to have lots of people reach out to me, and I felt like, I got the opportunity to pay it forward. So I'm so glad that you're here and that our group on Mommas Helping Mamas gets the chance to meet the catalyst behind it all. So I'm really excited. I know we've already kind of chit-chatted back and forth, but for those of you watching, Rebecca Duvall Scott is actually a really dear friend of mine. And I'm so glad that you took some time out today to help other mamas out. So thanks for being here, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Isn't it kind of crazy how our story evolved? Like I sit back and I shake my head and say, it's totally proof that God puts the right people in your life at the right time. And I think, saying that with our relationship, it's just as important to those who are in this group and watching it now. Like the timing is right. Just like we said, you're going to make the right decision. The timing is also right while you're here in this group. But Rebecca and I actually went to college together and didn't know each other. Didn't know each other until years after. I mean, like a decade after college. Okay, we're dating ourselves here. But when you decided it was time for you to begin the publishing journey of writing and publishing your book, your husband, who I do remember in college, connected the two of us in a really happenstance situation in the middle of the mall. I'll never forget it. I had already published my first book and was really happy to share with you my journey. So I had the chance to kind of be a mama helping you out back then. And then later I became the editor of your book and realized that really this whole thing wasn't about me helping you. It was about you helping me, because your book is phenomenal. It's Sensational Kids, Sensational Families. And it was a beautiful, beautiful journey as I was the editor of your book, navigating sensory processing disorder. Interestingly enough, my son was diagnosed with SPD in the middle of that journey. And we'll talk about SPD and how to help kids with unique learning differences and special needs in another video. But Rebecca, thank you. Thank you for being there for me during that and for being there for me during this, this unique time in our world, and embracing and challenging me and giving me the confidence to make the right choice for us, bringing over your homeschool crate and allow me to dive in and realize that this isn't scary. You talked me off the cliff. Do you remember that day when you brought that?
Yeah.
Well,
and I remember the day that when I didn't know what I was going to do. You look at me as kind of the professional in some of these regards, but I remember the day when I thought, my kid can't hang with public school. There's no way. He'd be put into a behavior classroom. He can't sit for 7 hours a day in a desk. He can't walk in a straight line. He's not going to be able to hear the teacher talk because he has auditory issues. I mean, there is a lot going on with him. And when I realized homeschool was the only option for him, and that was the way we needed to go, I had some mamas helping me early on, and some of them are part of this group where I went and looked at their materials, and they talked me in off the ledge several times and said, you can do this. And I think the point where I jumped over to, you know, taking that leap of faith was thinking, if it doesn't work, I can go back.
Yes.
So that was scarier for me back then, because we weren't under pandemic times. It wasn't chaos. But there's so many moms right now that are in that same situation that I want you to hear that. And this is the best time to hear it, is that if it doesn't work, you get to go back. Okay. The school will
Absolutely.
take your back because you know they're losing a whole lot of their population through the NTI, and some people are trying to hang with it, and some people just don't. It won't work for their families for whatever reason. So this year is a great year that if you want to try something different, there are options. Your kids will not be ruined. It will be okay. And you can go back to whatever. When life settles back down and we get back into a groove, I'm sure it's going to this pandemic is going to change what education looks like in general, but we'll all come through it, and it's going to be okay. And you can go back.
I love that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because several mamas have asked me and they're like, well, Stephanie, you know, like, I mean, maybe if I felt like this was a long-term thing like you do, I'd feel different. I said, whoa, hold your horses, people. I said, I've shifted my life. And actually, my book was the catalyst for that, to stop focusing on the future and focus on the now. So right now, what do you know? What do you have to work with? How can you use that to support your family? And don't get hung up on, well, what the decision I make today is what I have to do for the next 10 years. No, you will learn. And many homeschool moms have come to learn. They might, and families, they might homeschool.
Back and forth.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And rest assured, those of you all watching, I have every intention of interviewing other homeschool moms to share their journeys, many of which who have tried homeschooling, multiple kids, one goes back to school, the others stay, whatever. So we'll have lots of perspectives for you to consider here over the next few weeks as you make some important decisions.
Yeah.
But that's awesome, man. I mean, listen, if there's ever a time for us to empower one another, for women to unite, and moms and dads, but for families to unite and support one another, now's the time. And I'm just grateful that you paid it forward to me, and we can continue that ripple and that wave effect. So thank you. Well, let's dive in. So I want to pick your brain on a couple topics that other parents are probably chewing on right now, figuring out what's right for them. And I really think we need to start first at what educational options exist for our kids. So in a normal world, in a crazy pandemic world, really no matter what, there's always, I think, two really core educational options. Do you mind diving in on those two, what you think is available and kind of how you see them?
Yeah, and really what's available is what everybody is telling you. You can stick with your public or private school that you've been going to, and a spin-off of that now is NTI, which is non-traditional instruction. So that's their virtual program that I love these teachers that are putting together their little bit emoji classes and working so hard. And it's going to be better. Looking at that perspective this year, it's going to be better than it was in the spring, because they were crisis teaching in the spring.
Oh,
and they've had all summer, you know, and now that most of the school systems know they're going to start virtual, most of them, the teachers have time to plan and prepare. And so it's going to be a better experience in general than it was back in the spring. So that being said, you can stick with your traditional, what we call brick and mortar schools. That would be your private schools or your public schools, and do NTI or possibly go back in person later on, or you can homeschool. And there are several different options for homeschooling. So you can homeschool at home using an online certified curriculum. You can school at home using a structured curriculum that might not be certified and you're still running it, but it's like an all-in-one package deal. And we'll get into some of these things. So school at home using an online certified, school at home using a structured curriculum. You can homeschool and piece together your own curriculum, or you can homeschool and utilize online courses, co-ops, cottage schools, and kind of create your own hybrid model. So that's lots of different areas to homeschool. And I think that's what is so confusing to everybody, is when they start getting onto these bigger groups that you have a million threads going back and forth of what everybody wants to do. It gets very overwhelming and very like, I really can't do this, but you really can. You just have to figure out what works for your family. So that's
or feeling like, well, I have to go in one, like I have to be Montessori type, or I have to
Right.
unschool, or I have to traditional, or I can't do cottage school if I do this. No, guys, like it's all fluid, and it's all based on your family's needs.
Yeah. So that's the first decision. Are you going to stay with your brick and mortar school and let other teachers, teach your kids and you kind of help facilitate NTI at home? Or are you going to branch away from that, even just for the year, and try out homeschooling and do it a little bit different? So once
Yeah.
you decide on that, you can start moving forward one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think that's so good to know your options, but I think that before you sometimes for some families before you can make that selection, there's other things you have to consider. You have to ponder different things about your own life and your own capacity and abilities to be able to figure out what's the right one. So like I know, for instance, for me, before I made the decision, I had to think, I work full time. Now I own my own business. I work from home, but I still work full time. So there's lots of people out there that are working full time or it might have some concerns about, do they have the capacity or the time commitment to be able to do that? What are some thoughts that you have on that one?
Yeah, I think there's several different things to consider when you choose, am I going to stay in the brick and mortar school or am I going to try to homeschool? And jobs, and if you have the time and capability, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you homeschool 1 year and go back to traditional school? We've kind of touched base on that. That's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and let me add, you don't have to know that today.
Right.
So whatever
Absolutely.
decision you make, just know, you might try it out and you might end up loving, this new form of learning that you brought to your family, or you might end up not loving it
Yeah.
and
You
say,
might survive
please.
and go
Yeah,
back.
yeah,
That's
you
okay.
could survive, you could thrive, one of the two, right? Yeah, so don't feel like
I
you
love
have
that.
to know that, but it is good, I think, to be aware of your open-mindedness to either, because that might also kind of direct you down a type of learning option, right? Like you might
Yeah.
opt for an accredited version that has
Right.
is easier
Yes.
transitions
Yeah,
versus.
where your comfort level is within homeschooling, you can kind of find a good fit. Yeah, absolutely. So that you can think about that. Are you going to homeschool and piece together your curriculum, or how are you going to create, what works for your family? And the other one would kind of be to think about, are you going to homeschool and utilize online courses, co-ops, cottage schools? So we are going to get into that in a little while.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
some things to consider while you're.
yeah. And I think so when my family decided to do this, there were several things we took into account. And one of them was our kids' learning styles. So I have two kiddos who have special learning needs. One who is likely on the considered Asperger's, another who has sensory processing disorder, and neither of them do well with virtual learning, which had a lot to do with the decision that we made to go full-fledged homeschool. What are some other learning styles, or what are some things you've considered or thought through, that have helped you kind of dictate the right learning curriculum based on the learning styles of your own kids or other kids that you've been around?
Well, there's 7 main learning styles, and I've got my notes in front of me, so I'll read them to you.
Well,
Is visual, which is your spatial. You prefer pictures, images, spatial understanding. There's oral, which is auditory and musical. You prefer using sound and music to learn. Verbal or linguistic, you prefer using words, both in speech and writing. Physical or kinesthetic, that's my kid. You prefer using your body, hands-on, sense of touch. He's a seeker. He's a sensational seeker. Um, Logical, mathematical, you prefer using logic, reasoning, and systems. That's more of my daughter. She's definitely more visual and logical and oral. Social or interpersonal, you prefer learning in groups or with other people. And then you got solitary, is also a learning style where you prefer to work alone or self-study. So lots of different learning styles to consider. And I know we're going to do multiple videos and get into learning styles, but I'll go on and throw it out there for people who like to research. One of my favorite resources that helped me with learning style and what curriculum fit my kids' learning style was 102 Ways to Homeschool, or 102, I've got it on my shelf over there, 102 Top Picks for Homeschool Curriculum by Kathy Duffy.
oh,
She
cool.
also has an online website. So you can either get her physical book or you can go look around on the website. And that was that was one of my Bible of homeschooling. Yeah.
We'll add the link here on this video so people can get to that. But I do think if there was any blessing in the NTI experience that I went through over the spring, the unwanted experience, I got to better understand my kids' learning style.
Yeah.
And that taught me a lot. And it taught me that if I want my kid to progress and reach their fullest potential, I have to make sure that the learning options that they're getting is going to meet that need. So I think that's a great one. I think another component that people need to consider is the big picture.
Yes.
I love this. You told me this early on, and it is actually a supplemental curriculum piece we're adding. You said, Stephanie, like, I want to raise smart kids, but I just want to raise good people.
Right.
And I thought, brilliant, poof, mind blown moment. Yes. This learning environment, many of us are thinking as parents, all of the stressors that it's adding into our lives, but it's impacting our kids too. And at the bare minimum right now, like if we get through the next year and we have just helped them grow into amazing, good humans, the rest will come, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
yeah, I loved when you gave me that advice, because I thought you are so right. I'm not going to ruin my kid. I'm giving them a chance to, to be responsible and phenomenal humans.
Yeah. And I've somewhere in one of the books I read a lot. And somewhere in one of the books I read, it said, consider where you want your child to be in 20 years and teach your child what they need to know now to get there in 20 years. So I think we get hyper focused on, they've got to learn this in math right now. They've got it because people tell us this is what is grade appropriate. Okay. When you make a big shift into homeschooling, your mindset starts changing around who actually sets those standards, who actually is saying it has to be this way, where I know my kid's learning style. I know where I want my children to be in 20 years. So I want to start supporting them now. And a whole lot of it is character training. That starts at home, the work ethic, the being courteous, respectful, diligent, all of those things that we really focus on at home. And then the academics come on top of it. So I've always loved thinking, where do you want to be? Where do you want your kids to be in 20 years? So this is a blip on the radar. This is what I want other moms that are really stressed out and anxious to understand, is that the year 2020 is a blip on our radar. And, you still got all these other years to keep shaping your kids, whether you homeschool or whether you go to regular school. I advocate for all school choices, because I know not one size fits all. That's what my kid taught me. So I'm one of the far homeschoolers that's like, everyone's got a homeschool and, brick and mortar schools are bad. I don't believe that at all. I've got wonderful teacher friends and principal friends that have supported me and everything. And if, my daughter did go to kindergarten and first grade in public school, and we loved the teachers and we loved the program, but she thrives in homeschool as well. So that's what we've stuck to. So think about it.
For those who are like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about like building a good human, right? And the mix of it. Shoot me a note. I have a really great resource on Teachers Pay Teachers we're going to be doing in my family. It's called Kinder Skills, and it is built for kindergartners, but quite frankly, and we're using it all. It's going to be our group learning for our whole family, including mama and daddy, because I could use a reminder. But it's 75 little mini lessons on different components of character building. And it's super simple, super focused. Would be really good for like lunchtime discussion. But shoot me a note, or I'll put a link in here to the Teachers Pay Teachers page where you can get it. Again, that's a really good reminder. Don't feel like you have to do this alone. So here we're talking about some of these things. Main reason for Mommas Helping Mommas group being formed is because let's work smarter, not harder, ladies. Let's support one another, and there's resources out there. Use them. They're good. All right, well, so before we wrap up this video today, and we'll definitely, don't worry guys, we'll dive in. Rebecca and I are around for good. We're going to stick this out with you guys. But before we talk on any other topics, I really think it would be important for us to take a moment and to dive a little bit deeper into homeschooling and what are some of the different types of homeschool approaches, because I think this is the thing I think baffles most people. It baffled me when I was navigating this world, like how do I homeschool? What's the right direction? And until you really understand different options, it's
what's out there.
Yeah. So why don't we start with the school at home concept? Tell us a little bit more about that, Rebecca.
Okay, well, I'll go on and say we're going to talk about 7 main approaches, okay, because I know some people are taking notes or something. So 7 main approaches. You can school at home. There's classical, there's Charlotte Mason, Montessori, Unschooling, Unit Studies, or Eclectic or Relaxed. So going back to the top, the school at home, that's a whole lot of what NTI is going to look like this year. So school at home is kind of like your NTI program, or you might choose to do a certified homeschool program. And what that means is you're going to be working with like the K-12 program, or like Rebecca Online has a full curriculum program. It's going to give you your complete curriculum all in one big chunk. You'll work through it on the computer. You'll have satellite teachers that are teaching your children. You'll be facilitating, helping the learning at home. It's almost like your house is a satellite school for the big school. So Rebecca is one of the homeschooling programs that is school at home. So you actually get on the computer, they have teachers that are teaching these classes, you do all the work, you send in the work to be graded. So the parent has to facilitate to a degree, but there's still a teacher helping you, somebody you can go to and ask questions. And a lot of parents want that and need that. You send your work in to be graded, and you get your diploma. If you ever stuck with it long enough to graduate, you would get your diploma from their school. And like the Rebecca school is from Pensacola, Florida. So you'd actually get your diploma from them. And
it's like going to Florida without being in Florida.
Exactly. So if you do the K-12 program, that's school at home, you're working under other teachers and administrators that'll support you and help you through that program. And you get your credits and diploma through that school.
Yep.
Okay, so that's kind of what your school at home is looking like.
Yeah, and I know
hear people talking about certified or not. That's what they're talking about. That's what your certified homeschool program looks like.
Yeah, and for those of you guys who are still working full-time at home, the concept of homeschooling overwhelms you possibly because you don't feel like you have the time commitment to put in, but you want to give your kids a little more maybe than what you feel like you might get through NTI. I mean, I think school at home is a really cool option. I think it gives you some structure, but allows you some flexibility.
Right.
And, especially, so for my kid, I would struggle a little bit with that because it's got a lot of virtual components. But if your kid thrives in that learning style, it could be a really good solution.
Right. Yeah. And if you as a parent really want the extra support from the parents and the administrators, that's going to be a great option.
Yeah. Awesome. Tell us more about the classical one.
Okay, classical borrows wisdom from the really old educational practices. These things have been around for a very long time. They're going to borrow from your ancient Greece and Rome. If it's got a biblical slant, you're going to go all the way back to the Hebrew Bible, and you're going to be learning things from the Hebrew culture. So they really like to focus on the canon of great books and the classics, the masterpieces. So you think like really deep, meaty curriculum. It's got to focus on facts, data, logical, critical thinking, rhetoric, and self-expression. And that's from elementary all the way through high school. But that's what the classical model looks like. If you're interested in the classical model and that really appeals to you, you want your kids reading all of the great works and having that really deep thinking quality, then you might want to go with classical conversations. That's a huge one. That's the big classical base. So that's something to start Googling.
Oh, good. Thanks for sharing that suggestion, because I was sitting here thinking, what's a good curriculum for that one? And in this world, when you get the opportunity to weigh in a little bit more, you might find that this is something you feel like your kids are lacking or an opportunity. Why not dive in? Again, there's no right or wrong here. You get the opportunity to support your family. That's cool.
Yeah. And for classical too, let me just say, it doesn't have to be homeschool classical. There are private schools here in our area that do classical education. So you could still, if it's like, oh my goodness, where has classical been all my life? I love it, but I don't want to do it at home. You can go and find one of the private schools that does all classical education.
I'm finding a lot of parents out there are really evaluating their education as a whole. So even if I've seen some people shift schools, so they're still staying within the school system and not going into homeschool, but this is just giving you an opportunity to shed light on stuff that maybe you wouldn't have questioned before. Not that you're questioning. I actually think constructive doubt is a beautiful thing because it helps you find the answers that really works for your family, but it's really reevaluating. So I love that. Thanks for bringing that up. I've heard a lot about Charlotte Mason, and I know like this much about it. So who in the world is Charlotte Mason, and how is it connected to homeschool?
Yeah, Charlotte Mason is one of my favorites. She was a homeschool pioneer. and she is Christian based for her curriculum. Her whole theory is it's more child-led. Okay, so let me back up just for a second. When we talked about school at home and classical, those are definitely teacher directed, whether you are the teacher or whether you're outsourcing to a teacher and other school system, okay? But they are teacher directed. The other ones that we're getting ready to talk about are all child directed or child-led. So Charlotte Mason was a pioneer homeschooler in the child-led theory, and she wanted to utilize short periods of study mixed in with nature walks, nature journals, creating history portfolios. It's a lot of emphasis on observation, memorization, narration. So what this looks like, we use quite a bit of Charlotte Mason curriculum in my homeschool. If you like Charlotte Mason style, I'd recommend looking at master books. But what that looks like from a home standpoint is when we do his math book, it's telling a story the whole time about this beautiful little family. And so say you're learning perimeter and area. The beautiful little family is going to go to the grandparents' farm and they get goats and they get to make a goat pen for their goats. So you're going to learn how to do perimeter and area through the story of wanting to build this goat pen. So her whole focus was take it off the page and teach these kids that it has real world application. We're not just learning facts. We're not going to regurgitate a bunch of dates, but you're going to learn the story of history and how it all interrelates and why it all happened. And so she really works a whole lot through narration. If the kid can't repeat it back to you, they did not process it. And that's one thing I know from my special needs journey with Jacob. And he had some auditory processing things going on, especially when he was little. And that's one thing his occupational therapist told me early on is, Rebecca, if he did not say it back to you, whether it's his morning routine or whatever, he did not process it. And so Charlotte Mason fits right into that with the narration part of it. But she wants you to, her whole theory and philosophy is work for short periods of time and do it well, rather than do a whole worksheet of math problems and the next day you have no clue what you did.
So that's like learning, like deep learning skills that are going to stick. I love that.
And when it's applicable, it sticks, right? Yeah. We learn, my grandmother was a gardener. So she learned everything. She could name flowers. She could tell you what soil, if they were sun, if they were not. That was her niche. That's what she enjoyed. And that's what was applicable in her life. And she learned everything. And sometimes she would say things like she didn't feel like she learned a lot of other things. But those of us that are not gardeners, we don't have that type of knowledge. So Charlotte Mason theory really funnels you into find your interests, dig deep into them, learn everything, all your subjects through, that deeper understanding. So yeah, she's obviously one of my favorites.
Well, and interestingly enough, I only know this much about her, but that's the homeschool strategy that my family is taking up too. So it's just proof that, even if you don't know which homeschool type you're going down, you will find the right one for you.
Right. And hopefully as we're talking about them, people are going to start wanting to gravitate one way or the other, which is the purpose of this video, is to try to help you all understand, what's out there and what direction to go in.
Absolutely. So let's talk Montessori. I know I've heard of Montessori schools. I've not heard of Montessori homeschools. So talk to me more about what that homeschool type is like.
Yeah. Okay. So this method, Maria Montessori did a lot of psychological work, and she worked with a lot of special needs children. So her whole theory came out of that work. She believes in free movement, large unstructured time blocks, like up to 3 hours, where the kids can just roam outside. So think of pre-social media, pre-technology era, okay, where we all played in the woods and we made huts and we Pilgrims and Indians, whatever it is, you get outside, large unstructured times, and that kids know how to play. So it's getting back to that really play-based. Her curriculum has a lot of multi-age focus. So if you have several children in your family and you want to teach similar curriculum from the littlest to the biggest, that Montessori might be the way you want to start checking into. She's also child-led or interest-based, that you really customize the learning plan to the child. And she uses lots of manipulatives through all of her theory. You want to use lots of hands-on manipulatives. Manipulatives are tactile objects or toys. So you're going to learn everything through math by touching, so back to that child base when you're outside roaming the hills and running and playing, building your own stuff, using saws and hammers and, making your tree house or whatever, that's Montessori. So really giving the child a range of options to choose from, and it does a whole lot of autonomy work. Her whole theory really supports, a little child that's walking into kindergarten. You want them to be able to wash their hands on their own, get their jackets on their own, tie their shoes, put their toys away, so all these things. They really believe the parent needs to step back, or the teacher, because there are brick and mortar schools that are Montessori style, but the teacher needs to step back and facilitate learning and just let the child do their work. And play is work. So you still learn through it, and they still teach academics, but it's also a fascinating
fascinating.
approach.
And I think that, when you look at, if homeschooling is a direction you go down and you look at your day, you could even incorporate some Montessori time to allow for some of that. If that's
Absolutely.
not a direction you go 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I love that. Mm-hmm. The other one that I have heard of is this unschooling concept. It's almost like, so we've schooled and now we're going to break out. What does unschooling mean? And how does that apply to homeschool too?
Yeah, when you come from a traditional education, unschooling definitely feels like one of the most radical choices. Yeah. And they're based on a pioneer called John Holt. So if you like people and you want to research, you can think of that. But he really believed in a free form learning model that was also student centered. So we're talking about that child led. It's unconventional and it's very individualistic. So it's really based around your student's interests. So say your student loves dinosaurs, and my mama, who knows who I'm talking about, that her kiddo loves dinosaurs, they bridge kind of that world into unschooling. So everything can be taught through the focus of dinosaurs. Whether it's math, whether it's language arts, whether it's grammar, spelling, science, everything is taught with that focus. So unschooling is really about take your child's basic interests and build on them. And all the other skills can be built from that. And they really believe that whatever age the child is, whatever their interest is, they're going to learn when they're ready to learn. So you get these little kindergartners that, are sometimes in brick and mortar schools, and the teachers, no fault of the teachers, but from the administration above, really the school administration, pushing down what's going to be on that standardized test, what your kid has to learn and be able to regurgitate, right? Yeah. They don't like that at all, because if the kid is not ready to learn how to add and subtract, you're going to have a fight on your hands. But if you would let the kid get a little bit older and then they start expressing interest because maybe there's a couple of toys in the store that they want to buy, they're going to be motivated to learn how to add those numbers together and to make change and whatever else. So that's really the unschooling theory in a nutshell.
That's cool.
It is cool.
It is. It's a really, like you said, a radical thought, but when you boil it down, it's probably how a lot of education happened years ago.
Well, and don't we learn as adults, don't we learn what we are motivated to learn? Absolutely. So like when I met you and I wanted to publish my book and I had no clue where to start, right?
Oh, I remember that day.
I know a whole lot about publishing now because I was motivated to get that book out. So even as adults, that's unschooling in a nutshell. Take those interests, let the child build, let them learn when they're ready to learn. And it's the most radical child-led one that we'll talk about.
I think it's cool, but I think it also is a good bridge to the next topic, or the next type, which is the unit studies, because I feel like sometimes you can incorporate unschooling within this lens of unit studies. I know that's something we're going to do, added on to the family. Yeah, talk a little bit more about the unit studies.
Yeah, probably where they differ is that unschooling is completely child-led, and what their interest is, that's what you're going to go with. Whereas unit studies, the parents are kind of putting these together, still based on the child's interest, but you are going to learn these different subjects through this theme. So unit studies are thematically related learning plans. So whatever the student is interested in, the parent is going to start creating a whole unit around it that teaches all of the subjects. So for example, if your kid really loves Egypt, you can be learning where Egypt is in geography, right? And all about the world map and things like that. Their irrigation systems. I mean, Egypt is fascinating. So you can learn Egypt through geography. If you wanted to do the book of Exodus, the book of Exodus in reading class and study all of that. You could study Out of Egypt theories of human origins and science, or how they mummify bodies. There's tons of science. Egyptians were way beyond their time period in some of this stuff. So they really, truly are fascinating. You could do pyramids, triangles, things like that. In geometry, you're all the way up to trigonometry. So you're going to take that basis. So that's where the difference is between unschooling. If the kid didn't really want to learn about pyramids and unschooling, the parents would, say, that's fine. When you're ready to learn, I'll teach you.
Right.
But in unit studies, it's like, okay, this is the amount of work we're going to get done in a week, and we're going to do an Egypt week or an Egypt month. Cool. And then you're going to move on, to the next unit study.
That's cool.
Yeah, you learn all the other subjects through that focus.
I love that. I think that's really interesting. And gosh, some kids might not even hear of Egypt until high school. So to be able to, and I'm thinking of the same mama that you and I are talking about, because she gave me a book on mummification here recently. And so it's neat kind of how you can build from that. I love it. All right, well, we've got one more topic, one more homeschool type, the eclectic or relaxed type. Tell us a little bit about that, and especially how it connects with this co-op cottage school concept.
Yeah, okay, so the eclectic and relaxed, it's really becoming the most popular of all of the child-led different approaches. And this is where you might have been listening to us and think, oh, I like that, and I like this, and oh, I really like that. Okay, then you're eclectic. I'm eclectic as well. So while I say Charlotte Mason is my favorite, I don't use total Charlotte Mason curriculum. I use a whole lot of it, but then eclectic is where you're borrowing and sharing resources and ideas across a lot of the other approaches. So you might have been listening and think, well, that sounds an awful lot like unschooling, sounds an awful lot like unit studies. Well, they all start blending at some point. And the eclectic people, they piece their education materials together to fit the needs of the child. So my daughter's curriculum looks very different than my son's. She's my visual auditory and logical learner, and my Jacob is a very physical and kinesthetic learner. So they have different types of curriculums that fit them, and that's why we're eclectic. And then it also builds into, you can take it a step further, and you don't just have to homeschool alone. So I'm actually a director of a homeschool co-op. And that's where we get together for our socialization. We do events, parties, field trips, things like that, that they would typically miss out on in brick and mortar schools. And then I also send both of my children to local cottage schools. So one goes to a cottage school, one goes to an enrichment program. So one day a week, they get to go and take a class or two by another teacher in a classroom of peers, which gives them that taste of traditional school, especially for my daughter who is, she's older and she wants to be an obstetrician. So she is college bound. So she needs those experiences. So when you're eclectic or relaxed, you're borrowing from all these different approaches. You're even building in your own hybrid model of cottage schools and co-ops and things that give them a taste of the traditional school setting. And when you get up into high school, I know we have some people that have high schoolers, you can do CLEP testing. I don't know a whole lot about it because my daughter's in 8th and we're not there yet. But to my understanding, there's certain types of CLEP testing, and you can take online classes that double for college credits.
Oh,
so cool. Even in high school, before they even graduate and get their diploma, you can already be working on, so just like brick and mortar schools have their, don't they have some sort
AP,
of,
yeah.
Yes, the AP program and things where they can go on and get whatever credit and opt out of those in college because you've already got the credit. Homeschoolers can do that as well.
That's
if
cool.
you go that route, or you don't have to.
Yeah, and that's the lovely part about it, right? You get to go and flow with what your family needs.
Right.
We touched on a lot of things today that likely you and I will be doing some additional calls and different additional videos on the cottage schools, the co-ops, or two in particular. I think people are probably like, what is that? I didn't even know. Like, I'm just trying to figure out my learning style. But they can be really wonderful supplemental components to your homeschooling journey. So yeah, Rebecca, I feel confident you'll be back. I was going to ask you if you'll come back, but I know you'll say yes. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I do want to just say to the moms that are watching that are like, oh my goodness. If this overwhelms you, trust, I'm 7 years in. Okay. I've been homeschooling for 7 years. I did not start out at the level that I was, you know, that I am now. I did not start out that way. We have always been part of co-op, but my cottage school just got added, I think, 2 years ago. So whether you're going to only think about this for 1 year and you might go back, or you think, oh gosh, I love it, I'm going to stay with it, you can build up to where your vision is, okay? Just survive this year, okay? It's okay to do what you need to do to survive this year. You're not going to ruin the kids. There is no wrong choice. There's lots of flexibility and grace in 2020. So
Absolutely. And
just roll with it. It's going to be okay.
When you report into your to the county that you're homeschooling, if that's a direction, they don't ask you what type of homeschool are you going to do. So don't feel like you're like, oh my gosh, I have to pick one of the 7. No, our intention of sharing this with you guys was really to help you be open-minded to the different ways that you can help your child learn based on their specific needs. So, embrace this call as an area of opportunity where, you and I'm new to this, you're veteran in it, and hopefully you're kind of walking away with a nugget of some information. But, as you're listening, if there was a topic that you're like, I really wish Stephanie and Rebecca would talk about something else, shoot me an email. My email is mommashelpingmommas@gmail.com. Shoot me over an email, post something on our Facebook group. Rebecca and I'll be back, and we'll definitely touch on that. If you're not on our Facebook group, get over there. That's where we're doing some real-time engagement. We have questions. You got a question? We've got answers there. Pose them. We've got veteran homeschool families, and we have other people who aren't homeschooling but are looking for some additional learning opportunities. Mommas Helping Mommas is open to everybody.
Right.
We'll also be sharing some unit studies there for the whole family if that's something that intrigues you. A friend once told me that after I empowered her with knowledge on this whole process, that we aren't making ripples, we're making waves. Rebecca, I think that's my new motto for this group. We aren't making ripples, we're making waves. Rebecca, thank you for starting the ripple in my life and for helping to create a wave where together we can really help other mamas navigate this unknown. So, mama who's out there listening, you aren't going to make a wrong decision. Do what's best for your family, and lean on the other mamas in this group and beyond to help you do that. Thank you, Rebecca, for being on.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun.
I had a lot of fun too. All right. We'll see you back. Thanks, guys.
All right. See y'all later.